Hello, welcome to Season 9 of The Horrific Podcast. We're two friends who live in different places but share a love for scary movies. The theme of this season is 100 Years of Horror. We're going to watch two horror movies from every decade, from 1920 to 2020, in chronological order. We want to see where horror came from, how it's changed, and maybe even make some predictions about where it's going. If you want to see the full list of movies we'll be reviewing this season and follow along, then check out our website at thehorrific.com. Thanks for joining us, and we hope you enjoy the episode. I feel like some episodes of The Daily Show got a little too meta. Like, I realized there was a lot going on at the end of Clinton's second term, but this movie was crazy. Yeah. I could not believe the number of famous people that were in this movie.
Yeah, it was one of those, like, almost like a Mars attack thing. It was like, wait,
yeah.
You're in it? Oh, you're in it? Yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah. It's weird how, like, similar some look over time and how different. Like, did you know Usher turned 30 while they were making this movie?
Really?
No, but you'd believe it, wouldn't you?
Oh,
so he
what?
looks exactly the same his whole life. It's beautiful.
I couldn't even tell you how old he is.
Yeah, he was playing a high school student, but I think he was like 20 when it was made.
Well, that's par for the course, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, but yeah, hats off to him, because I look a lot rougher than I did 10 years ago. So, you know.
I was thinking he was older, but
you had seen this one before, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. This was like one of those movies that would play on like Fox. Like
I was about to ask you that. Like, do you also remember this being like always on network TV, like the edited version with commercial breaks when we were kids?
100%. Yeah.
It's such a weird choice for that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I wouldn't really think about this being a movie that I would expect to see just showing up like on a random afternoon on TNT, but yeah.
I wonder how they like pick those out.
Yeah.
Which ones they could just get the rights to or something. But yeah, 1000% remember seeing this on that.
Yeah. So that was definitely my memory, and I was really curious how it was going to hold up. And we had to pick another movie from the 90s because the one that we had initially was not available for streaming. And this was one that has always kind of been in the back of my mind as a movie that I remember watching when I was younger and thinking was pretty good. And after I picked it, I was like, I'm excited to do this and talk to Bryce about this. And then I'm like, oh, but it might not actually be good. It might just be something that like 12-year-old me thought was great.
Right, yeah.
So, yeah. But I am excited to talk about it more and find out if I am really embarrassed or really proud of this choice.
Yeah, sounds good.
In 1998, Miramax brought us The Faculty, a sci-fi teen horror movie directed by Robert Rodriguez. The star-studded cast includes Elijah Wood, Josh Hartnett, Selma Hayek, Jon Stewart, and Hyde from That 70s Show, among others. This movie tells the story of a small-town high school beset by alien parasites that take control of the faculty and spread to the students, parents, and rest of the town. Despite middling reviews, this movie brought in over 4 times its budget of $15 million at the box office. It can currently be streamed with Amazon Prime or Paramount Plus. So what did you learn about this one?
So the only fact I have here is that this film was directed by Robert Rodriguez, which is a well-known director.
Robbie Rod.
That's what I call him. I don't. But, so the screenwriter for this was Kevin Williamson. And just to tell you some of the things that he had wrote, Kevin Williamson, he wrote Scream. Helped write Scream, right? Scream 2, The Faculty, I Know What You Did Last Summer. It was also a co-executive producer on Halloween H2O. Now, he was also the creator of the TV show Dawson's Creek. Basically, Kevin Williamson was the reason for like the 90s horror explosion, which was, Scream, I Know What You Did Last Summer, and Faculty's even in that, the kind of revival of those teen horrors.
Yeah.
He's the one to blame. He's the one that did it. And then also it was directed by Robert Rodriguez, who made the horror film From Dusk Till Dawn, but he also, from the Desperado series and, like Sin City and Planet Terror. I really actually like his work. But he was the director of this film. And those are the facts I got.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like you were mentioning there, I felt like for a season where we're doing horror through the decades, we would be remiss not to include like a 90s teen horror movie.
Yeah.
Just because that was such a prominent thing in the genre at the time. And for whatever reason, in my mind, this one always stuck out as being a lot better than the others. Like, I have this one ranked far ahead of like I Know What You Did Last Summer or even Scream or some of the others. And one reason I wanted to revisit it was to see if I still felt the same way. And so going back to it, I think I was kind of pleasantly surprised in that it reminded me a ton of Slither and very little of like I Know What You Did Last Summer.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. I mean, I think this is basically like a remake of like, I don't know, like a mixture of like Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Oh yeah,
and,
for sure.
They even mention it, whatever other film that they talk about.
The older one that they said that one was
that they were kind of basing off of. We've done the movie. I just can't think of it right now, but I think like that all kind of stems from a movie called The Puppet Masters, which came out in 1951, about a parasitic alien. Not that alien invasions are that wasn't the first, I'm sure, but I think that was the biggest influence. But I was actually kind of surprised that you picked this as well, because us reviewing, those 90s horrors that I love, like, just because that was, I was like the prime age, in the late 90s, early 2000s to be watching some of those. So I just have that, love for Scream, and I Know What You Did Last Summer, and even this. And so when you picked it, I was like, oh, hell yeah. I am totally down. I know what I'm getting myself into, but I'm totally down.
Yeah.
Just hope I don't ruin it by trying to watch it for like a, to do the podcast on, where we tried to pay attention a little bit better. But I was thoroughly happy when you picked it. I was like, oh, this is gonna be good. So
well, good. I'm glad. Yeah. And I enjoyed it. Like I still, it's not like super Hall of Fame level horror for me, but I enjoyed watching it. I mean, I thought it was entertaining, and I thought it had some good scary moments.
Yeah, I wouldn't say this is like a Texas Chainsaw Massacre by any means. And I do feel like it is a formula movie, like, as in you have the, anti-hero.
Oh,
you
sure.
have like the job. I mean, it is, typical. It might as well be, the Breakfast Club with alien invasion.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And so like the part of me, like I guess the older guy in me that's like, I don't want to like conform to those, like, like my anti. I have a problem with people telling me what to do, kind of thing.
Yes, I might have picked up on that.
Problem with authority
over the course of our lives.
And it like that part of me is like, you don't want to like it, but just that the other side of me that's watched this since, I mean, it came out in 98. I would have been 10, and and I probably would have watched it at 12ish. I just love them. I just love it. So. The thing that always pissed me off when we watched it on TV, though, just real quick, was I always thought that they blurred out, the girl parts that I wanted to see. But I realized that was just part of the movie when I watched it unedited. Fox, I was like, Fox, why are you blurring that out?
Yeah.
That didn't even happen.
Yeah, I was kind of curious to know if, like, how edited was the edited version of this. Because there was definitely, like, some pretty intense violence, but I also don't really... It's just such a weird concept to me to think about right now. Like, the idea of editing film or art or anything else. Like, even the idea of, like, bleeping words out on the radio just seems really ridiculous to me now that I stop and look back on it and remember that being a common thing, or like the edited Walmart CDs and stuff. It just that all just seems so completely absurd to me. And so like the idea of, I mean, I get that, you know, if you've got a bunch of little kids at home in the morning, you probably don't want like super intense stuff on the airwaves. But at the same time, it's just like it was somebody's job to go in and to decide like what parts of this movie were a little too much for young Bryce to see. You know, like that's just weird. And I'm glad that we watched it not edited, but I am really curious to know what parts of this made it and what didn't.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking like, I thought it was like kind of a conspiracy where they made it an R-rated film, even though it wasn't that bad, but that the idea was to get people to want to go see it that couldn't. And so, I don't know, because, you know, watching this, like, I mean, maybe it was like the drug use. I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, so I guess it, you know, there is drug use and a person gets shot in the head, but I don't know. I just kind of had the theory like, man, I bet they kind of chalked it up to be a little bit worse, because like there's no doubting that these movies, The Faculty, Scream, I Know What You Did, like that's like teen horror
for sure. It's written very much to appeal to high school kids. I mean, in this one even, I think that it has a larger message of sort of like conformity. It's more like based on those feelings that you feel in high school with like everybody else has stuff just figured out, or, you know, this is as you're getting to the end of high school and thinking about what comes next and how you fit into society and sort of conform to the path that's been laid out and the expectations of the culture at large and everything else, and how that can feel like kind of constricting. I think that they tapped into a lot of that with this movie in the way that they set up the story and everything else. So it was meant to resonate very much with people in that period of life. But I thought it also was like an entertaining, decent movie in addition to that. So I agree with you 100% that I think that it was written very much for teenagers, and by making it R, then that just makes people more excited to go find. It's almost like saying like, you can't do that. You makes you immediately want to do it.
Exactly.
So they're just saying you can't do this to a bunch of teenagers, and it seems to have worked.
Yeah, I think that was exactly it. And, you know, I think, you know, out of the movies that we talked about, like, this is definitely up there in quality. Like, I thought it was put together pretty well. You also have, like, the problem of, like, watching movies like this that, you know, we don't have anything to compare it to. You know, so, like, a shark attack, you can compare that to because sharks attack. But, like, with something like this, you don't. So it's, like, as far-fetched as, like, the ideas seem, it's like, well, it's still a possibility because we haven't seen anything otherwise, you know.
So you're saying if they were doing, like, a bunch of fake shark attacks, we could compare that to, like, known science and decide whether or not what they were doing was realistic.
Yeah.
But since this was such, like, an unrealistic situation to start with, you don't really have that same, like, reaction of being able to, like, nitpick it.
Yeah, so you have that. So then what I was doing was nitpicking, like, okay, we got the anti-hero, we got the nerd, we got the bully, we got the, you know, mean coat, you know, so it's like things I felt like were typical, which is why I said the Breakfast Club of horrors, but it's like, well, that's just being nitpicky, you know, at this point. Like, I'm sure I don't remember school ever being that bad, but that's neither here nor there. It's just, yeah. So,
and I think some of that too, though, is, you know, we've talked a lot as we've gone through here about, like, the stark difference between, like, Hollywood horror and then the more, like, low budget or foreign or independent or kind of do-it-yourself type movies. And I think that one thing you get with the Hollywood movies is a reliance on those familiar kind of, like, character archetypes, because that makes people more comfortable with the story that's being told.
Yeah.
And that's just a thing that you're going to see in basically any Hollywood movie, are sort of these at least somewhat familiar characters, or maybe, caricatures that they fit the characters into, just because it's like, okay, audiences are comfortable. They know how to interact with this character or what to expect from them. And so I think that it did fall into that a lot. But there was also some decent horror.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. There were a few horror scenes I really liked.
Yeah, but I do agree in that sometimes you kind of rolled your eyes a little bit. It was just like, ooh, Josh Hartnett knows everything, even though he's a slacker.
Yeah, go to his house and he has a full, like, chemist thing set up out there. And
yeah. It's like, he's brilliant, but he doesn't know how to channel his energies for good.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah,
he's also athletic, too.
Yeah, exactly, right. And I loved the idea that he stole all of that equipment from chemistry lab when that was like hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Right, yeah.
Where there's like, nobody was going to ever know that was missing. And
yeah, I also just really like the bad boy, character, and then like they go to their house and it's like a nice house, like he had like his own setup and his
and
you're sitting there thinking like, because we're older now, we know how much houses generally kind of cost, and you're just like, yeah, you're a bad boy, you get whatever you want, don't even act like you don't have money.
Right.
Your parents are in Europe.
Yep.
Like that's not just but so the old man in me gets frustrated with that, but
it's like, he's not a badass.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I don't know. In that same vein, there were a few other moments that were just very cringy for me. One was that the soundtrack included Creed covering Alice Cooper, which is what?
Yeah.
One, who let that get made? Two, who thought that you should put it in a movie?
Yeah, remember, it's the 90s. Creed could do whatever they want,
Yeah.
I did like that they had Offspring in it, which Offspring's like, I wasn't really into them much growing up, but I'm kind of respecting them a little bit more now. Yeah. I was like, oh, there we go. But
well, that opening scene where it's like the Offspring song is playing really loud and the coach is like yelling at football practice.
Yeah.
You're just like, okay, I'm in for a 90s teen movie. Yeah. I get where we're at.
But it had like, so it had, Creed covering I'm 18. Mm-hmm. It had Soul Asylum covering School's Out. It had Another Brick in the Wall by a band called Class of 99. It was just like, you could just include the actual songs. Like, that's also cool to do.
No, we need a 90s, gritty, 90s nu metal version.
I'm sure that they paid more for that Creed I'm 18 cover than,
Yeah. But I also, and then there was that scene where, like, the quarterback is talking about wishing people would just let him be a D student. It's like, what are you talking about?
He's like, I'm going to quit football
straight
to focus on education.
Yeah.
And keep my D average. And it's like, hey, man, you can work harder and be
I want
better.
people to look at me and see an underachiever, because I work hard to not do well. Like, what?
Yeah. I think my like, for me, the cringiest kind of scene, which was granted towards the end, but it was when the goth girl, basically, like, the goth girl wouldn't let, like, so the goth girl had the parasites in her, right? She was an alien, and the blonde girl was also she was the main alien, and then I think it was Elijah Wood, or no, it was Josh Hartnett. Like, he was trying to get in, and they were, like, saying, like, I'm not infected, she's infected, like, kind of going back and forth. And it was just like, hey, why not just say, like, you're right, I'm infected, go to her and get infect. Right. Like, it just didn't make sense to me, because it was like a Mexican standoff in a way.
Right.
But, like, two of them were wanting the same thing.
Well, yeah, and if they had, like, the hive mind, like it was supposed to have, then they would have known that,
So it was just like, hey, why not? Like, that was just a waste of my time at that point.
Yeah.
And don't waste my time. But that was like probably the most, I was just like kind of shaking my head at, like, that's kind of dumb. But
yeah. So yes, definitely not a perfect movie, but there were things I liked about it too.
Yeah.
So there was the scene where like Delilah and Frodo see the possessed teachers attacking the other teacher, and then they run to get help, and then they come back and all the teachers are just talking about how nothing happened and it was just a misunderstanding and stuff. And it really, then they just like keep going to school, and you can tell they're like wary of the teachers and stuff. And it reminded me a lot of It, where the kids like all know something's going on, but the adults either don't see it or they don't care or won't help or whatever. And so just kind of that like alien feeling of there are all these people who are in like the authority structures above me, and they're all either part of this thing or they won't even listen to me about it being a problem. And so I'm just kind of stuck in the situation, and just kind of the creepiness that comes along with that I thought was interesting.
Yeah. That's a good point. I didn't think about the tie to It.
Yeah, just some of those in the hallway reminded me of it. And then there was also the scene where Elijah Wood sneaks out at night and he sees the faculty standing at the edge of his yard, and they're all like in the shadows. And then he falls down and they surround him. Then the dad comes out and they all disappear. And then as they're going back inside, you see like the silhouette in the window closing the curtains. That I thought was just like super creepy and well done all the way around, and the way they use like the light and shadow and stuff. Mm-hmm. I really enjoyed it, and I felt like that was occasionally some of those scenes worked in that were much more like horror focused and much more like an exercise of the horror genre than they were the teen genre. Mm-hmm. And those were the things that kind of kept me engaged as it went along.
Yeah, I think that was one of the difference with this was compared to the other teen horrors, quote unquote. Like this, I did think that it had the legit horror scenes, and my favorite was the one where Frodo and Delilah were hiding in the closet. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like I thought that was set up really well, for what they're doing. I was kind of frustrated at the solution that they had. Was like, it was just a mannequin. And I was also frustrated that Frodo didn't just take a picture of like any of the stuff going on. Like if you have a camera, like you have the prime. Yeah. Like that's your weapon. But that was probably my favorite scene. And the thing too with this, I just felt like it was kind of like pedal to the metal from the start.
Oh yeah.
And I appreciate that, and I respect that, especially for going for, I think it's like an hour and 40 something minutes or so. And it's just like, man, this is like, I felt like they gave it a good shot, and got a lot accomplished. Like I can bypass the character development, Yeah. And like the cheesy kind of ending, because I like it when no one wins.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, I felt like you also kind of knew from early on that this movie wasn't going to take itself too seriously. And I think that's one of the things I didn't like about like what you did, or I Know What You Did Last Summer, and some of those where I just feel like they're too into themselves. Yeah. But that scene in the beginning of this one where as each character comes on the screen, it like freeze frames and like shows their name in like a stylistic font.
Yeah.
Like they're introducing action figures or something. Oh, yeah. It was pretty funny.
Yeah. Crazy.
Yeah. Oh, I also, this is totally random, but I liked the way that they did kind of the design of the creatures, and I don't want to say the way that they looked, because the CG was pretty bad, but just the overall, like the way they found that initial little tadpole thing, and then it got in the water, and then it started expanding, and then later you see it like attack the rat. And I thought the way that it was like wrapping its tendrils around the rat was very reminiscent of The Thing. And I wonder if that was an inspiration for how they did some of that design.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, so I didn't necessarily mind. So the CGI was bad, was also the 90s, so.
Yeah, exactly.
But I actually, one of my other favorite scenes is when they're, forcing the group when they're in, Hot Shot's garage, trying to get them to verify if they have it or not, and they're sorting his drugs that he makes, the homemade drugs. Yeah. And when Delilah, I don't know if I'm saying her name right, I'm just repeating what you said earlier.
Yeah.
And so when she snorts it and she turns around and her face just has those all like moving, and all that. Like I thought that was I liked it. Like I thought it was a well put together little scene, because I have like that freaky like bump on skin, like phobia.
Oh yeah.
I think it's like starts with a T. I don't remember what it's called, but it's like where you can't see like group of holes and stuff, and like the lotus pod.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so like that legit kind of creeped me out. That, and then when Frodo at the end got those that like started in his face, like that was
that was my favorite scene.
Yeah, that was super like kind of cringy, and not in the like didn't want to see it happen, but just like fuck, that makes me feel like super weird right now. Just thinking,
wildly uncomfortable.
Yeah. So
yeah, when he stabs the big creature in the face, and it just immediately projectile vomits leeches back into his face,
like
and they all start burrowing in.
Yeah.
That was so intense and like sudden, and the way they pulled it off I thought was great. And so just the feeling, the way, and I love it when a horror movie does that, where you're like, okay, he's gonna make it out, he did the thing, he wins, oh god no.
Yeah.
That's just a good like way of steering the excitement, I guess, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, it was like the last, well no, it was one of the last like jump scares.
Yeah.
But it was like a legitimate kind of scare, because you're like, man, not Frodo, like he just worked hard to win, and he's gonna get the last word. That's where they could have like fixed the movie, in my opinion. Yeah. Just had him become like the new one, and then they all die.
Had it not be a happily ever after Dawson's Creek ending.
That's how you can tell like how good of a day I've had if I'm just wanting everyone to like become an alien and just
yeah,
not make it.
They win, okay. I was happy that we did this one. I thought it was a good representation of kind of late 90s horror, and a good one to include in the list as we make our way through. And I'm actually really worried that this is the last movie that I remember seeing like as a kid. Because as we get into the 2000s, it's just going to feel like, oh yeah, these movies came out like a couple days ago, right?
Oh yeah.
I saw some of these in theaters.
Yeah.
Yeah, because when we were doing the 20s, it was like, oh, this is ancient history, and now here we are a few weeks later, and it's like, oh yeah, I went to that.
That's actually a good point. That was kind of the purpose, though, to kind of see where we kind of came from.
To make me feel old?
Yeah. 100%.
Mission accomplished.
That's why I picked this, for sure.
Yeah.
But the thing, too, that was like, that I'm glad that you picked this film was like, because we've done like Invasion of the Body Snatchers and those types of horrors from like the 50s, like this is like the sci-fi 50s.
Oh yeah, like a more modern sci-fi horror take.
Yeah, like the 50s, horror, whatever we called it, I can't remember now, but this is like a modern take on it.
Yeah.
They did really good.
Holds up. And that's it for today's episode. If you've listened this far, then thank you, and we hope you've enjoyed it. We're always looking for new ideas, so if you have any questions, comments, or movie suggestions, please send us an email at thehorrificpod@gmail.com, or feel free to comment on or message our Facebook page. Just search for The Horrific Podcast. Thanks for listening.
It also had a Oasis song, and I'm not a fan of Oasis, so that kind of pisses me off.
What do you not like about them?
Okay, they're so damn cocky, dude.
Yeah.
And it's like, you guys write 4-chord songs, like you repeat the same, like, melodies and tempo, like everything of the Beatles, and then you're gonna say that you're the greatest band on earth?
I would pay any amount of money to see them live if it was like actually all of them, because I feel like there's a better than 50% chance that Noel and Liam would throw punches on stage, and I'm here for that.
Yeah, but I'd do that. I'm just saying, acting like the greatest musicians alive, and they don't know all the musicians. They don't know.
I mean, to be fair, they have written nearly a handful of hits, okay?
That's true.
I mean, when you think of the Mount Rushmore of most popular and best songs ever written, I mean, you could see as many as 2 Oasis songs in the top 500. So,
yeah.
I mean, who are you to judge?
Right. Like, they're copying the Beatles, who copied, like, you know, the good stuff from America, and it's just like copies on copies, and it's like, what the? Okay. Anyway, sorry, that was my musical beef I have.
I think my new stance is that no music is good.
I can get down with that.
I also think no movies are good.
I can get down with that.
I also think no humans are good, and that's why we just need a good alien invasion.
I can get down with that.